thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to have Deidre on with us. And if you don't mind, I would love to just hear a little bit more about you,
Okay.
maybe a 2-minute drill or longer. Hey, how did you get started in this business and where'd you come from and why do you like it so much?
Okay. So my name is Deidre Bland and I'm with Arc Realty. I'm located in the Pelham office. I moved here a year ago and my reason for moving was because of my son. I wanted to, or myself and my husband, we wanted to provide a better opportunity for him as it related to academics and athletics. And it has been a true blessing being here. I've thoroughly enjoyed living in the Birmingham area. I am from Massachusetts, but I moved here from Meridian.
Are you really? Like I knew Mississippi, but I didn't know from Massachusetts.
Yes, that's where I'm really from. But I moved here from Meridian, Mississippi, and I have been a realtor since May 1st of 2019.
Nice.
So I really enjoy being in the real estate business. It is challenging, of course, right now, especially 2023 with the rates being as crazy as they were. I don't think a lot of us made what we did in previous years, but we sustained,
Yeah,
ourselves.
you lasted. You still have your license.
Yeah, we're still in it. And
That's right.
unfortunately, you do have some that are falling off, but hopefully for the most part, those that are still in it, they'll give it another shot. And I think that this year is going to be a better year for all of us, including people like you,
Yeah, I mean,
lenders.
I think the outlook on 2024 is positive across the board.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
I do
how,
too.
how when you really look at the data, when you look at the statistics, when people say, "Oh, it doesn't matter how hard of a market it is, you got to power your way through it." I mean, well, that's true simply because you could have a small percentage of the highest performers. Because of that, they're going to do well in any market, right? But when you look at the fringe territory, the numbers do matter. I mean, they're just
Absolutely.
there are less frequent people shopping.
Yes.
And then you also have from the available personnel a lower conversion ratio. You can't tell me in mass or at scale that doesn't make a difference. No, of course it
It
does.
does, yes.
Of course it does because everyone has less exposure and then everyone ends up fighting for a scrap of meat.
Exactly. Exactly. I
Yeah.
like the way you put that. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean it's a sensitive thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's nice to at least consider the thought of that being behind us. Whether or
Yes.
not it's completely behind
I
us is an
agree.
entirely different story because even the people who are paid the most to have the strongest economic outlooks are still wrong.
Right.
Like no one's right. I'll read, the top 5 most popular economic analyses and rate outlooks going into the next few months, and all 5 of them are on different pages.
Right.
And the only thing that shows me is that uncertainty is certain.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Exactly.
That's all we really got.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
what did you do before coming into real estate?
I was in education.
Ah,
Yes. I was in education for 18 and a half years. And for the first
18 and a half, chump change.
for the first 3 years of my real estate experience, I was doing both.
I see that. Now, some people say that I can be a teacher during the school year and I can be just a realtor in the summer. But that doesn't sound that feasible to me. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever heard that before?
I think that is very, very challenging. It's doable for you to really hone in on it during the summer, but those agents that are doing that, eventually you're going to have to close some of those deals during the course of the school year. So
Right.
you're still going to have to take time away
Because
from your
nobody's going to
classroom.
hold out for you because you're a teacher.
Exactly. And right now, I wouldn't recommend it, especially with the interest rates, coming down. And things are starting to pick up slowly but surely. And what do you think about the cost of waiting? Some people feel like, oh, sellers in particular, I'm going to wait. The interest rates are coming down. They're suspecting that the market is going to turn into the same thing that it was in 2020 during the pandemic. Pandemic year, okay, it was a phenomenal year for all of us. But I don't anticipate us ever seeing that ever again.
Well, something bad has to happen. Right?
Last year was
Like
bad.
Well, what I mean though is outside of the real estate space, something bad has to happen in the world,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like for us to
Yes.
experience that kind of gain. So do we really want another COVID?
Nope.
Another financial crisis of a different type, right? Do we want the economy to plummet to a degree where we're talking about varying degrees of recessions for the next 3 to 4 years? I don't know that that's ever really worth it when we look at the grand scheme of things. Nobody can even chart their own path and understand what their industry is going to be in the next few years or how viable they're going to be in their own that they're already in. And I think to answer your question, there are two different ways of looking at it that are inherently related, but you have the philosophical side.
Yes.
And then you also have the known numeric side, or at least the projected numeric side of things. Because it's very easy when you actually boil it down and do the math to understand why buying in a high rate environment, whether that's objectively true or perceivably true, they coincide because it affects buyer sentiment, and that's where you really want to work against the grain.
Right.
So if you can buy in a higher rate environment, I have a very difficult time understanding the contrary argument to the fact that you're getting a good deal, right? Like if you go against the current because everyone else is afraid to buy, then yeah, we still have inventory issues. I'm not here to say that it's a perfectly balanced supply and demand system in the real estate market. And this is not just true for Birmingham, Alabama. This is true all over the nation.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
if you have, limited inventory, so what? But the demand plummets because not only do you have buyers that are not enthused, but you have dissuaded sellers because they don't want to become buyers again. Then the ones that are going to be listed are more frequently sitting compared to a hotter market, a hotter market on the buying side, which I guess is a hotter market
Right.
thoroughly. And you're going to find yourself buying a home at a lesser price than what it's going to be when it picks up. So what frustrates me, and it's easy for me to be more emotionally detached and look at it from an investment perspective, right? Like I don't want to move. I don't want to sell my house. I don't want to buy another house. So it's comfortable for me to think about, what I would do in a perfect scenario. But I really applaud my clients who are not waiting to buy. And I first want to preface by saying, I know Deidre makes money by helping people buy. I know I make money by helping people close purchase transactions.
Yes.
This is not about you or me trying to convince you to close, because the sad reality is that most customers on the ground exposure to these experiences are underneath the veil of a sales professional who, of course, is always going to describe why it's the time to buy. When's the last time you've ever heard a social media post, a talk like this, where a realtor is saying it's not a good time to buy? It doesn't happen. Realtors never say it's not a good time to buy. And the tragedy in that is that people think, well, I can't listen to what a sales professional tells me. Insurance, real estate, mortgage, doesn't matter. Anybody who's inside that residential sales column, they think I can't take it without really reading between the lines because I know that they're going to sell to me no matter what. It's always a good time to buy. I guess depending on your perspective, you could always find a way to justify why it's a good time to buy. But what we're about to get into is objectively and numerically why it is superior. And so think about it like this. If you were to buy a home and it's $300,000, right? If lo and behold, somebody from California is watching this and be like, $300,000, what is that, a lot?
Right, exactly.
So let's just say for the sake of conversation, you can apply the numbers however you like. It's $300,000. And that's the ticket price on the home. We'll say that it's going to be minimum down payment. First-time home buyers sometimes don't go as low as 3% on a conventional. We'll say it could be second time or anything else. We're just going to go with the standard 5% down scenario.
Okay.
Right? We've got potentially 5% appreciation gain. And the reason why I say 5% is because some years that's really steep in a 12-month period. But if you look at least what Zillow as a relatively large capturer of information, right? Like take your opinion out of it, they have a lot of data to source.
They do.
So, because that's where a lot of customers like to window shop. So
It's not all correct though, but they do have a lot of data.
is absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with you there. And there's a lot of different things to unpack and a whole nother conversation there. But they were reporting 4.6 to 4.9, if I'm not mistaken, within the first 8 months of 2023. So if you apply that logic with buyer sentiment improving because the outlook on rates is positive, a lot of people think it's going to go down in 2024. I will also say I don't think it's going to go down nearly as much as what people are saying. Like I really don't think that's going to happen. I heard somebody asked me last week, apparently they're reading an article or talking to a customer or both, and they said, hey, I'm hearing that interest rates will go down by 3 points by the end of 2024. And I said, it's going to be economic Armageddon, for the backbone of our economy if that happens. No. I would never say that ever again if you're talking to anybody else, right? So no, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if it does, we've got a whole new batch of problems, like for early payoffs and everything else. It just gets weird if it were to happen that aggressively. So let's just say, boiling this back down, 5% appreciation, a $300,000 house this year, a year in the future, maybe $315K.
Right.
If the math follows. So not that ridiculous, understanding how many more people are going to want to play ball. You're going to have people who are not getting the seller concessions that they want or need. They're going to be people who are covering appraisal gaps again if it kicks off even half as much as we're describing. And let's say you have a point better in interest rate after 12 months, which would be good. That'd be good. Regardless of what you pay to get it, let's just say, all right, well, the difference in the payment is going to be, whatever that is, $1,200 different over the course of 12 months combined. So if we have that plus your average refinance cost, assuming that if we look at this holistically, you're going to want to do a refinance in the future if you buy now, which is a decently safe assumption for most borrowers on the market, most buyers. So I don't know, we're looking at better part of $6,000-ish in total cost to buy now. And I specifically mean the payment differential in the first year from lower price but higher interest rate to the contrary, to vice versa, plus your average cost of refinancing. I mean, that's all over the board. So take that with a grain of salt. We'll just say $4,500 for the sake of conversation at that range. So now we have to rack and stack that against what you're going to miss out on, not only in payments gained from a principal perspective, because you're not paying rent, and I got it. There are some people out there who are living rent free. It's a little bit of a different scenario, but for most people who are shopping for a home, they're going to be more on the hot seat when they're paying 100% interest by paying rent. So now we have people who are getting nowhere over the course of 12 months because they're not paying toward their principal. They're paying toward rent. So let's factor that in, right? So we have, I want to say it's going to be less than $3,000, but still something to be gained in this particular example and how much you're going to gain in principal when you break down your payments. Now, you're going to have 5% appreciation following this example. So now we're rocking between $17,000 and $18,000 worth of benefit by having it for a year at the end of the day from what you've contributed and then what the market has done for you.
Right.
So if you subtract that from that, which is $18K minus $6K, we're at $12K in net benefit for somebody who's purchasing at $300,000. You can't tell me that a net benefit of $12,000 after everything is factored in is not eyebrow raising.
Right.
Like that's a big deal. So that's why I would say, and by the way, the rates that I'm using in my head to work on that are a 6.99 to a 5.99. That's the 1% jump.
Okay.
So I really think that if you treat your home as an investment more than you do a monthly payment, it changes your perspective and you understand there's always an alternative. But that's not what people think. They don't think about what the alternative is. They just think, can I do it or can I not? Which is important. You don't want to put yourself in a bad situation. But
definitely not.
When you break it down, you got to realize that if you only ever do what everyone else does and you don't have any ability to be an intellectual maverick, to fight the market, to take advantage of an opportunity when other people won't or can't, sheeps don't get good deals like wolves get good deals. So you may think you are just because the market is offering a better interest rate. But there's nothing precluding you from that deal later and a lower interest rate on a higher home when the cost of refinancing is only a quarter of the the appreciation gained. You're losing. Like you're losing by waiting until you buy later. And if that's how you want to play it, you can't tell them they don't want to do that. I can't tell them they don't want to do that. Instead, I'm just going to do it.
Right.
Because I want to win.
Right. Exactly.
So a lot of people, they have extenuating circumstance that drive their motivation.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear your perspective a little bit more on that. But we're in a vacuum, like we're in a comfortable place having a professional conversation. So it is easy for us to say, all right, well, if you have the choice, doing it this way is a little bit superior. Not everybody has that luxury. You kind of have to do it when it's available to you. Maybe you don't have your first quarter bonus, your second quarter bonus, so you don't have the cash to pay for your closing costs or to purchase. Maybe you're waiting on a job offer letter to size up. Maybe you're moving, right, because of your job. Maybe you just had a kid. So all of that stuff matters.
It does.
And we're talking about things that are inherently purchase loan specific,
Right.
but it makes a really, really big deal because it drives the economy. Like a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, a lot of the articles that are written, a lot of the programs that are in place, especially what residential sales agents choose to advertise in magazines and social media and all the things, they wouldn't be talking about all these options
Right.
if it wasn't what they needed. And you know, it's interesting for somebody like me because I gotta stop looking at social media. It drives me crazy. But when I hop on Facebook and then out of the first 10 things in my feed, 5 of them are real estate agents advertising interest rates. I'm like, you're not even licensed to look at a rate sheet. So, you know, like be careful.
We got to know though.
Right.
We
No,
got to know.
It's important. And I try to keep my people informed as well. You know, I want people to know,
And
hey,
you do a good job with that.
I price the same scenarios because I want people to understand like this is what it looks like comparatively. It's different for each person. Right. But when someone goes, hey, buy a home from this particular builder and this particular mortgage company that they own, if it's that screaming good, they probably purchased an old batch of bonds that they're offloading. So who's to say how many more they have? And that's tricky. It's not necessarily wrong to advertise it when it's compliant and the right numbers are in there to avoid predatory lending or advertisement practices. But what's interesting to me is when people offer specific, not concepts, but specific numbers.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they're never referencing source data. And that's what I find to be absolutely fascinating. And of course, I'm biased because I'm a broker and I have multiple lenders and I look at rates all the time.
Right.
So it's easy for me to say, it's not quite that simple.
Right,
But at the
right.
end of the day, it's because everybody says realtors don't care about rates. Realtors don't care about rates. And it's never always so black and white, right? When do realtors care about rates? When it helps them. Like, of course,
Well,
right?
I
But
mean, you gotta
also
be
is to
informed.
keep buyers informed.
Yes, that way you can inform your buyers.
And I think so too. So it's interesting when you really break it down to understand what's going on, and all of that logic rolls right back on to why we're even having this conversation in the first place. And the question you asked about what's the cost of waiting now? If there wasn't a cost of waiting now, how could we objectively defend our encouragement to buyers to buy now? And so at the end of the day, I think that all of this is important to recognize because your clients may not have had anyone spend any time, right, until you got a hold of them breaking down what this looks like. And you want to, hey, like you're doing yourself a favor. And
Yeah.
it is, you know, you're not being greedy or irresponsible. You just got to weigh what is the alternative, because people don't think about the other side. They just
That's
don't.
true. That's true.
It's a now kind of
that's
society.
the world we live in.
Yeah.
You don't wait for anything. You got to get it right now.
What are you seeing? Like, are there any particular commonalities or frustrations or anything between you and, or not you, but your customers and the market? Like, is there a common denominator of what is frustrating your customers in the market?
What is most frustrating to customers right now are the number of days that properties are staying on the market.
Frustrating who? Sellers?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
That's
okay.
frustrating to sellers. How many days they're staying on the market. And then also, typically you're not in a multiple offer situation. So that means that some of these offers are coming in a lot lower, you know, and it goes back to comparing to what your neighbors and your friends say that they made off of the sale of their property that they bought in 2020 or 2021. And the market is just not like that right now. Also right now, homes that are over $400,000, they are remaining on the market for a longer period of time. They're just not selling as fast.
Well, they say smart money is dormant.
I guess so.
Seriously.
I guess so.
When and without going down a totally different rabbit hole, I cannot tell you how many times I've been recruited by lending institutions that want me to write loans for them, not just as a wholesaler, like
Right.
not a partner, but an employer. Like they want me to sell only their stuff. They want me to be a retailer. And at least 3 times from those recruiters this past year, they have said, well, you got to understand your populations, because we pad our margins, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but we pad our margins for certain loan types where the population is less informed. I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is, I see it, but I want to hear you say it, is that certain populations that we know to be less educated, you can get away with charging them more for those loans. And so you grip it and rip it. And they're like, yes, right? Absolutely.
Awful.
And so it is awful, but what if it's so customary that people they're not even able to delineate that, right? Because at the end of the day, you could work for no commission all day long, right? And a lender could sell for no profit all day long. An insurance person could write a premium and, not collect any residual and give the best deal since sliced bread, or at least in the local market, to a customer. But nobody can survive like that. Like, no business can stay alive like that. So yes, I hear your perspective and I agree with you, because it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that way. People who are less informed, and whether that is just a region, a socioeconomic group, or whatever, if people are less informed, the prevailing, corporate outlook on that is not, let's get them up to speed. It's like cha-ching, 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 right?
Taking advantage.
Oh my God. I almost got in a little bit of a battle with a traveling circus seminar group who came to one of the local hotels. And I mean, I kind of got mad because I felt like they were trying to trick me, because they seemed like they were trying to trick a lot of people into these tax lien courses, right? Like, seminar scams are rampant. And, when a lot of people hear these YouTube and Facebook and Instagram ads and they say, this is not a scam. Well, I mean, there's a reason why they're saying that. It's because so many of them have been reported. And there's somebody in my class, he and I started to, sniff some weird stuff, and he ended up finding the same organization under a different name that had left the state of Utah from a series of disputes and an actual court case being filed and a verdict not in their favor. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating, because this is them. And when I confronted them, one of them admitted to actually being a part of that party.
Wow.
And so you see that, because what I witnessed was looking at who they were, how they sounded, how conforming they were, more than they were educational. No real information or data. All rah, pump your chest, let's get you pumped up about this, without telling me, okay, well, where are the meat and potatoes here?
Right.
And they were very clearly taking advantage of people who didn't know any better to discern that. And I was like, you're doing this to my people. And I told them, I was like, I don't appreciate that. And they had to escort me out, and I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, this
Thomas.
is how people roll. Right? It's how people roll. So you got to work with somebody who understands the market.
Yes.
In an acute way. Because if you have not been playing intimately in the game, you might think like your hypothetical neighbors that you were just referencing, right? Like, hey, it still works like it did in COVID, but it's very different. And people don't understand how quickly the pendulum can shift, because every number that I just said could be different in a month.
I was just going to say, it could be next week.
It could be next week.
Yeah.
It totally could. I mean, I don't think people understand that at least twice every week for as many weeks as I can remember, the rates are going up and down.
Yes, they are.
Like, it went up and down. 2 days ago, it was up. Then yesterday it was down. And then this afternoon it changed up again. And they don't realize how sensitive it really is. They don't understand that consumer spending during Christmas actually shows more consumer spending to the Fed, who perform retroactive analysis to increase interest rates again. So the first full week of January, showed a local increase to the week before. And people were like, I thought rates were going down. I was like, it's not that simple, my friends.
Yeah, I know.
It's not that simple. And I'm oversimplifying, because job reports had a part to play in that. Investor Outlook had a part to play in that. Predictive analysis of what the Fed is going to do. So now we're always battling predictive analysis by economists and investors compared to retroactive analysis from the Fed, because they're more lawyer and attorney oriented than they are aggressive economists. So there's always a balancing act, and it always involves the human component. You know what I mean? Because that's what
right.
that's what we're really trying to operate within, is what we can emotionally and intellectually handle.
Right.
Because people don't care to even dive 25% of the way into this conversation like you and I have. They're like, man, that backsplash is just garbage. And that's it.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
true.
it.
That is true.
What else are you seeing?
Um, just, it's slowly picking up, which is a good thing. I've talked to some other lenders and they're like, "Ooh, Deidre, finally, I'm starting to see, the light at the end of the tunnel." And I said, "Yeah, it's picking up. But we need the interest rates to go down just a little bit more, we really do, so that we would be able to offer our seller clients something reasonable, to go to." Like the example that I just gave you, someone who's selling a home in the 400 to 500,000, when they go to buy their next home, they want to be able to buy a certain level of home. And when the interest rates are too high, that limits what they can afford,
Well,
the affordability.
some people can't even requalify for the same purchase again.
Well, that part is very true too. Yeah, that part. And that kind of makes me think about what you had mentioned a minute ago, in terms of why people move. What do they do in preparation of, getting ready to buy a house, whether it's the first time or second or fifth time for that matter.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of talk about just if someone is a first-time home buyer, those, I love working with first-time home
Me too.
buyers. It's so exciting, but yet they're very, very nervous. You got to go at a steady pace with them. But what do you recommend to those who are considering to purchase their first home in 2024 in terms of their preparation, especially as it relates to their debt to income ratio? Because that plays, of course, a big part. And just tell them about the process. Tell them what to expect.
I mean, there are several pieces to that, so I'll try not to bite off more than we can chew. The number one thing, though, that seems to be a limiting factor for people who have not yet bought are the assets they need up front to make it happen.
Correct.
And a huge reason why I say that is not because, they're younger or they don't make as much money or whatever else. It's usually just because they don't have anything to sell to roll over, right? So naturally it's going to be a little bit more expensive.
Yes.
They're more interested in reducing the down payment or down payment assistance,
Yes.
and a few other ways to go about doing so. So I think that really educating people on, okay, seller concessions can only be applied to this, this, and this, right? Closing costs include this, this, and this. Closing costs and down payment are not the same, because I get a lot of questions from especially military, because I do a lot of VA stuff as a military guy myself. But when people don't really understand that closing costs and down payment are two separate things,
Right.
They're two pieces to comprise a larger equation, and they can become very overwhelmed when they really look at that. Oftentimes I'll get somebody say, well, I need to decrease my monthly payment from what you and I previously discussed, but I also need to bring less to the table. And it's a seesaw. Like,
Yes.
you have the decision point is the fulcrum in the middle. And if you want to, at least conceptually speaking, there are some sweet spot in rate pricing right now that kind of change this a little bit. But for the most part, when you have a lower interest rate, your upfront costs are going to go up. And then the same thing occurs in vice versa fashion. So I realize that a lot of people want their cake and to eat it too. But if you can't strike a balance and you're seeking a mortgage loan, you are the one being invested in. The bank or the lending institution is investing in you. So understanding where people make money, I think, is interesting. I wish there were more savvy buyers who were interested in that. I just had an amazing conversation with a new client of mine earlier today who just went under contract. And it was the first time in probably at least 12 months that somebody was really encouraging a deeper conversation about amortization and how much I can contribute in principal-only payments to reduce the FIP. And what does this look like over the course of the life of my loan, regardless of whether or not I refinance or
That's
move out.
good.
And it was amazing, right? Now, I know that most people don't want to have that conversation, and I don't want to take this conversation there, right? But knowing that closing costs and down payment are two separate things, that if you do get seller concessions from a seller, which has been happening quite a good bit lately, that can't go toward your down payment. So a lot of people who want down payment assistance don't realize that that is in most cases, that's also loans. I mean, you do have specific grants and specific bonds. The more beneficial it is and the less it costs out of pocket for the first time home buyer, or really any home buyer who's eligible for it, the more limiting it is, or I guess limited in quantity. You know, like if someone's really giving a grant or a bond, it is really attractive as an advertisement medium. But if it's really good for you, somebody's not making money on the back end. If somebody's not making money on the back end, it's government instigated and it's very limited because they're going to stop when they hit their quota. So that can be tricky. So understanding where all of those things are available is very, very, very interesting. And debt to income ratios, you know, they differ by loan type. They really do. So maybe somebody would not be able to qualify for a conventional loan, and an FHA loan makes more sense. Or what if somebody comes up and they say, hey, I really want to get an FHA loan, and everything I'm looking at, I'm like, why would you want to do that? And they're like, well, because it's for first time home buyer. I'm like, no, it's not, right? That's not what the FH stands for, right? You're talking about, you know, your first time home buyer benefit available in a conventional loan versus going with a government backed loan that you're significantly outpacing the benefit. Like you're ready for a conventional because of your credit scores or whatever else. So assets, huge. Debt to income ratio, big, because if you don't have enough income to overpower the minimum payments of the debts that you hold that are credit bearing, as well as what is about to be your new housing payment, then you're in trouble. You know, if you're spending half of what you make gross, not net, but if you're spending half of what you make and you're a W-2 wage earner, hourly or salary, you're not going to be able to fit in a housing payment on top of that. So it's not going to work. You know, I see a lot of first time home buyers, maybe they're a young couple that just got married, or they're a young couple that are living together, or a couple of friends, all those things that are common, and they pull their incomes together, and we have to look at everything. So your total income versus your combined debts. If the numbers work all day long, we can do it, right? We can do it.
Right.
People get cosigners through their parents or their uncles, or usually it's a familial tie, but that's certainly something to look at as well to help with the assets. Going back to that a little bit, a lot of people get gifts from family members, super, super common, especially the younger the buyer is. So there are a lot of different ways to go about it. It's always a puzzle to put everything together. And then the third biggest piece I would say, and these are not in any particular order, so I shouldn't say third biggest, but a third piece that is also big is your credit score, because that's a hard stop. It's either it's there and it's good enough, or it's not there or it's not good enough. And I mean not there very literally, because some people don't have a credit score that populates just because they haven't established a debt profile. But the amount of high balance credit card debt I see is astounding, because in September of 2023, we as a country reported, I want to say a 30-year high, if I'm not mistaken, in consumer credit card debt. And I also heard a very alarming statistic that in Q4 of 2023, 1/3 of registered mortgage transactions across the country were cash out refinances, right? Because people had to consolidate. So there's a lot that goes into that. But at the end of the day, there's not a very streamlined way through our educational infrastructures to help people with their credit scores. And a lot of people say, my credit's not that good, but my wife's is, or my husband's is. And I'm like, well, you're using both of your incomes, right? Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, because we've got to take the worst one.
Right.
And everybody has 3 credit scores. We've got to take the middle in value. If you have all three of your scores are higher than mine, then we've got to take my middle score, right? And that's going to price both of our deals if we're going in together.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't realize that as well. And they're like, well, why do we not average it out? Well, it doesn't fit within the risk threshold of the investor. I don't know of a single, mortgage company on the planet that is sustainably reputable that does it any other way. So there are some things that are true across the board, because I represent a lot of different lenders, so I get to see a lot of different cool things and speak a bunch of different languages. Some people hate that style of doing business. I absolutely love it, but it keeps me in the know a little bit more, because I'm always curious about what some people do and what some people don't. And there are some things that are common throughout,
right?
Like absolutely common. But it does cost money to buy a house, right?
Absolutely.
Like some people will say, well, I really want to create a program or at least organize different professionals to collaboratively offer a program that feels like no money out of pocket for closing costs, no money out of pocket for a down payment. And I was like, technically and conceivably, you can do that. But it is tricky because it's very tight. Like you're trying to put somebody into a very, very tight box. And the more, I guess, the less regular the mortgage product is, typically the more susceptible it is to being discontinued. And it's not a significant risk. I would never not put somebody into a product because I'd be worried about it being discontinued, but it does happen. So making sure that people understand credit is, I mean, there's a red line drawn. It's got to be good enough. It's black or white. And then we've got your assets, right? And perhaps we can source more assets than you think. A lot of people say, I only have this amount of money in my checking account. Well, we haven't even talked about your savings, your retirement, which you can leverage or at least just show as reserves, right? Your brokerage account is still available. This other like 401k that you didn't know about that your employer has that you've been contributing to that they didn't tell you anything regarding. I mean, you can still technically show that. Maybe even you can withdraw from that. I've had several customers who have withdrawn from retirement accounts tax-free up to a certain dollar amount, depending on their 401k authority for real estate purposes.
That's right.
So there's a lot of different things that you can do to make it fit together and to work with it. And that's why having somebody like you to kind of confer with and say, hey, Deidre, like I want to buy, here are my apprehensions, here are my concerns, because I don't know what it is about real estate professionals, but people just want to tell you their life story.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the trust that you build and the rapport that you build with your clientele. But there's a lot that goes into it. But if I have to pick three, I would say having some money, because even if it's truly a $0 transaction, the mortgage underwriters are still going to want to see something in the bank to make sure you can make your payments.
Definitely.
So you got to have money. You need to have strong credit. It doesn't have to be the best credit you've ever seen, but it needs to be above certain minimums. And I would say, at least from my experience, that I typically don't trust solutions that are beneath 580. And when you go beneath 620, it's very hairy, very expensive. So there are different brackets, right? Like it's a green light, a yellow light, a red light, and a stop.
Right.
So you just got to be careful of what you're getting yourself into, because if someone says, hey, like I don't even like doing ones that are that low, it's more of a desperation type situation, and you have to have compensating factors to get there. Because it may often be better for a consumer to get their score up by 20 points. Maybe we do a rapid rescore, something of that nature, a little bit of coaching. Maybe I'll refer them to a credit repair specialist if it's a longer term plan, and we get it up. But if someone was like, hey, I have a 540 score, I'd be like, oh, well, I have somebody who can do beneath 550. I just haven't seen enough of that to give me a lot of like really strong confidence that it's anything good for anybody.
Right.
Especially the buying consumer. So credit, assets, income, as much as it is important to improve DTI, like you said, your debt to income ratios, because you want to make sure that it overpowers the debts to include the roll up of your new housing costs, your month to month housing expenses. And a lot of people don't realize that, if your income is less stable and it's not well seasoned, if you just started a brand new job and you're a contracted employee and you get paid 1099, you've been doing that for 2 months, we're going to have a very difficult time, because we don't really have enough data to perform the analysis in arrears of your sales behavior, of your work behavior, your profitable natures or lack thereof. So it's tricky. Somebody say, hey, well, I've been working as a babysitter. I get that one a lot. I've been working as a babysitter. Can I count that? And I was like, well, how are you getting paid? And they were like, well, from the kids' parents. And I was like, no, how are you getting paid on paper? And they're like, well, I wasn't. And I was like, well, then you don't have a paper trail. There's no way we can even use it, especially if you didn't even claim it, as 1099 income on your tax return. So the variable income piece is another highly sensitive topic that people don't regard, because for most people, they just haven't had an opportunity to be educated on that before they talk to somebody like me or you.
Absolutely. So if I'm a first time home buyer, then what do you recommend? What do you tell people? You need to be working at the same employer for 2 years or 3 years? What's the lucky number?
Well, there is a 2-year rule in terms of seasoning your income, but it doesn't matter how long you've been at a particular employer or a specific line of work, as long as you show progression.
Okay.
So if you were to create or I shouldn't say that, if you were to start a brand new job and you're salaried and it's base salary that we're trying to use to qualify how much you can purchase, and you just started that, or even if you're about to start it, you have a job offer letter and you're actually going to start it after you close, shortly after you close on the purchase of the home, we can use that. And we're going to abide by the numbers as long as the income letter is contingency free.
Okay.
But if you didn't work at all before that, that could be problematic. But if you had, let's say, 2 years of work history and you got a letter from a new employer, or even if it is a promotion letter within the same employer to acknowledge more income. I deal with promotions all the time.
Okay.
That's very easy.
That's good.
It gets weird though. It's not so bad if somebody leaves self-employment to become W-2, hourly or salary. But if somebody were to leave hourly as salary and start a company, I had that happen last weekend. Somebody goes, "Hey, I started my company 6 months ago. I'm really excited to buy a house." And I said, "Well, don't get too excited." Don't get too excited
I
because
know you hated to tell them that.
I was like, you might need to wait.
Yeah.
You might need to wait. So there are a few things that are involved in that, some specific mortgage lending nuance. And, that's why people like me do what we do, because we're total nerds for it. And we understand that a lot of people don't want to do that. But what I try to do, as much as I can have a little bit of a conversational dance with the customer, is I'll try to ask open-ended questions. I'm like, "Hey, let's talk. You tell me what you want to do." And then I'll just ask questions where I see potential weak points. And then I want to see how you fill in the gaps. And then we'll go from there. Together, we paint the picture. And then now I have something that we can work with. So I'll just let them talk, and I'll prod here, I'll prod there, I'll back up, and I'll figure out, where exactly we need to address something. And going back to the example I talked to you about before, we just started talking. We talked about so many different things, about credit, about money saved, where they want to be, school zones. It was a really fun conversation. And I was like, well, tell me about what income you're using to qualify. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a business owner." I said, "Okay, for how long?" And she was like, "I started 6 months ago." I said,
"That's it.
This is cooked, right? Like we got to wait, and here's why." And so you just gotta be able to detect it. And that's why I don't see how people, I know how they do it from a business perspective, but I don't see why people would want to work at like these really, really large online institutions, because you can't really get to the bottom of that in the same kind of homey way. You've got to pre-approve aggressively and quickly. And then you actually, sadly, you have to filter out when you go under contract. And that's when you decide, okay, this is a live deal. Do I want to take it? Do I not?
Right.
And then you have somebody like me on the ground who picks up Humpty Dumpty trying to put him back together. So it's all good fun. But what I love about what you described about trying to get somebody up to speed is that it's educational, and you can build a strong relationship with that.
You sure can.
Because it's not really, and I love this. It may sound cheesy, but I love the idea of, do you or can you buy a house? It's not yes or no, it's yes or not yet. Because there's not much getting in your way.
Right.
Because time can overcome all of your limitations. You have bad credit. Time can fix that with diligence. You don't have enough money. You can save money.
Right.
Like, you can save money. Like, if you want to, you can save money. There's very little holding you back from searching for jobs that are going to give you either more income or stable income.
Right.
You'd be surprised how many conversations I have where they actually have the flexibility to change the way they're getting paid. And that can be really helpful in certain circumstances. You just got to make sure that it's all laced up. You know what I mean? That everyone's on the same page and that we have it legitimately.
Right.
I don't want, a buyer to turn into a liar, and then we have to go back and audit that when we realize that they did something they shouldn't have.
Right.
So that's where the education comes into play
right.
again, once you're a little bit further in a deal sometimes. But it's cool just because we always have the opportunity to try to make it work for the person.
Absolutely.
And there's never only, in very rare circumstances would there be only one solution. But for the most part, we have different ways of going about it, because it's not like, oh, this one way of doing it is the only way to go about it. No, usually it's just a starting point.
That's it. That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need. And then just let us take you on that journey.
Yeah.
Well, that path is going to lead you home.
Now,
Just got to trust the process that we got to go through.
I want to ask you, relative to one of the things you brought up earlier, what is buyer sentiment like from your side of the house? Because you talked about, hey, it's picking up. For me, it's like as soon as January 2nd hit, people were coming out of the woodwork. Some people more serious than others. But what the rate market is actually doing, I don't think tells us everything we need to know, because there is a point where a new normal sits in and people just can't wait any longer. And then when you have a slightly improving market, because it physically is, but you have people who are coming to grips with what the new numbers are now.
Yes.
Seasoning out of the COVID environment. To me, that's a healthy, realistic, and wonderful combination, because now we're like, hey, this is the status quo, at least for the time being. Let's play ball, right? And stop holding out for things that may or may not happen.
Exactly.
Are you seeing that?
But that's the thing. Right now, buyers are not moving rapidly. Like, they are really moving at a snail pace. They're looking, oh yeah, I love this, I love that. Well, do you think you can call this your home? Oh, let's just go see this one, And then by the time they mull over it and make a decision, I want to go to that house. Remember I told you I love that one on the hill and this, that, and the other thing? And then it's like, well, I'm so sorry, but it's under contract now. I mean, when you're looking for a home, you need to do it when you are ready. Not just to look and see, what does the market look like? What are they putting on the market these days? You need to be ready, willing, and able to go on and make a definitive decision to go on and make that home become yours.
So I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. I think that I would be a horribly impatient buyer's agent.
You have to have a lot of patience.
If I ever were one, because if somebody were to say, I'm not ready, right? Especially if I had that validation from a financial services professional, and they were looking at something like, not only are these prices not accurate to when you're going to be, eligible to shop, but the inventory is going to be completely different.
Yes.
So I think I get it. I get why people look for the sake of looking, because it's fun. Pictures of houses online generate the activity. Like, we might not even have a job if it wasn't for the house generating excitement. Like, that is the sexy product. But it does baffle me time and time and time again, where it doesn't matter what is said, all right, or how much more of an increase there is in consumer education. I mean, it doesn't matter. People always fall back into this mode of, I really like this one, I want to go, kind of look at it. And they know, they're in no shape to purchase. They don't even want to purchase, right? And I don't know why they would do that.
But that's why you have a buyer consultation before you start showing people homes. So you can see where they are. They should have their pre-approval letter that lets you know what their budget is.
Should.
So that is so true. But if somebody cannot produce that pre-qualification letter to you, then 9 times out of 10, an agent is not going to waste their time starting to work with you. Because if I show you homes that are $500,000 and $600,000 and you fall in love with them, and then they come to you and you say, okay, well, the max that you pre-qualify for is $350 or $400. Those $350 or $400 homes are not going to look like anything that you just previously saw with me. And I'm going to have a very hard time.
HGTV thing where you have to downgrade expectations.
Right. I'm going to have a hard time getting you to fall in love with what your money will allow you to fall in love with.
Right.
So that's why it's very important to meet with, and also so you can start building your relationship. Because you got to start building a rapport with this person.
Yeah.
And the buyer needs to know, okay, there's 10 things that I just love about homes. Okay, well, 9 times out of 10, when we go out here and we look at these homes, we're not going to find the perfect home. But what are the top, 4 or 5 things that you just have to have, so that when we go and we look, we can make
list
sure
that is so hard to
we're checking those
obtain.
boxes.
Yeah. What about family dynamics? I really enjoy looking at the way that most women in a traditional relationship, the way most women approach it, and the way most men do. And it's so funny because a lot of the stereotypes are true. And then if you have a single man who's buying, it's a totally different circumstance than if you have a man and a woman with 2 kids. Like it is, and that's also a little bit different than an elderly married couple. It is so funny to me to see it because the dynamic of power, the dynamic of influence, and by power, I mean really decision-making authority as it pertains to the transaction. So I'm like, this is so fascinating to observe. Who wants to be, quote, bothered by certain things? Who wants to have the finger on the pulse? Who wants to be completely detached? So interesting. So what do you see regarding like a relationship dynamic as a couple tries to approach a home?
You just got to figure out which one is going to be the decision maker, and you lean towards that one. But it's also, as a realtor, you could be a counselor too. It is amazing.
You could be
some
right?
of the things.
You could be. Absolutely. Sometimes it's demanded, right? If somebody shares with you enough.
Yeah. I mean, because they really do start to open up with you, or when that decision making starts to happen, how the husband and the wife, they can't get on the same page. And if they start arguing or showing a different side of themselves in front of you, you're like, okay, wait, hold on. Let's just talk about this. Let's do the pros and the cons, things like that. But it's a lot of fun because you can build a lot of great relationships that could turn into friendships, or just those that you keep in contact with, and you never know. Hopefully they will send you some referrals.
Oh, right. Like if you establish that strong of a relationship that is really hallmarked by trust.
Yes.
Why would they not? And it's funny when you uncover, I mean, as long as it's not a really horrible situation, it's funny when you uncover some of those little things between the two of them.
It is.
Sometimes I can't help but laugh. I had a customer not too long ago who wasn't really aware, and this is a bit oxymoronic, but she wasn't aware how unaware her husband was over his finances.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not saying that they had completely separate finances, but one of them was running a business, yada, yada. And when you realize that, tax season is going to slap you a little bit harder in the face than you thought because you didn't know how well or, not so well your significant other was managing the books, you're like, oh my gosh. It was funny. It's like I've had people who've, really aired their grievances to me just because I happened to unluckily time the situation and my exposure to it.
Yes.
And I'm like, ooh, I feel you. Like that stings a little bit. That stings a little bit. Yeah. But I mean, I see, just from my purview, some really interesting scenarios where you have to deal with things that you are very clearly not trained for. But you are the face of a transaction. You know what I mean? Like more than anybody else. Someone who's working with you is going to remember Deidre, right? Like they're not going to remember the other professionals as much. They sort of just help bolster the opportunity in the transaction.
But we're a team though.
Oh yeah.
So, I do want you to remember who your lender was, your closing attorney, and build a rapport with all of us so that the next time we can all work together again. Because that we don't just look to go to the closing table and then just leave.
Agreed.
I really want to establish a relationship with Thomas. He's a great guy. It was a wonderful experience with my client. I want to send some more people to him. So we all want to work together.
Oh yeah. Like I totally agree with that. And then also, not just from the consumer's perspective, but the other professionals keeping track of all that, you can protect opportunities. Like there are times where I've had buyers come out of nowhere, had no idea that they wanted to buy again. Right. And then they hadn't really made the connection back again with their real estate professional. And protecting opportunity, I think, is awesome as much as it's something that either party wants to have protected.
Right.
But it just kind of really enhances that neighborhood feel of things, right? And I feel like you have that, like for sure. Like people are like, okay, well, I feel like I've got, Team Mom behind me. Like this feels great, And I'm unstoppable. She's got my back.
Right.
And I think that's key because
Absolutely.
people, they talk about the concept of commission breath, right? When you're so hot on something that it's got to happen. Well, that's not attractive to a consumer.
Right.
They want to know that Deidre's looking out for their best interest. And
right. And that you're sincere. It's not about you. You deny yourself. It's all about them. You take care of them. The rest is going to come to you.
Right.
You're going to be well taken care of. You just got to take care of them, and then you'll get which do you.
Mm-hmm. Because you wouldn't be even committing the time to talk to them or to show them houses or to conduct these consultations or anything. Like
Right.
if you weren't wanting to support them,
That's exactly
and then,
right.
for the most part,
Right.
with an unfortunate, few examples, it doesn't always reciprocate, but
Right.
It certainly does follow for the most part. And
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's really cool to see how different people go about their business, what different consumers think about different things, what is triggering, what's exciting,
Yes.
what kind of really depresses people for a short little while from not
Yes.
wanting to participate in the market. And I think that at the end of the day, people, they think that a face on a listing or a listing that is really not a listing, but a buying agent wants it to look like a listing kind of a thing to generate activity and phone calls. I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, like that's who I have to talk to buy a home, instead of realizing they can talk to Deidre and Deidre can show them any home
that they
then
want.
in your typical breakdown of commissions, like the other side pays for it.
That's right.
And that's a huge thing. I would love to hear your response to this. Why is it that people don't understand that? Because every now and then somebody will go, well, I don't know if I need my buying agent. And I was like, well, why would you not? Because you're not paying for it. Like in most cases, you're not paying for your buying agent. So are you dismissing a golden opportunity by thinking you have to pay for it and not leveraging the support?
Well, it just depends. Now, if you were representing somebody and they wanted to buy a home that's for sale by owner,
Right.
and if that seller is like, well, I'm not going to pay a commission,
Yes.
well, somebody's got to compensate us for what we do in that transaction.
Right.
And that means it would be the buyer. Or let's say that the seller was to say, I'm only going to pay 2%. Well, then that buyer would need to pay that other 1% for the cost of hiring a real estate professional. I mean, we are real estate advisors. We are qualified to do what we do. We're professionals. We are licensed to do what we do.
Right. That's the big thing that a lot of
Yes.
consumers don't understand is if it were that easy, you would get your license.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you get your license, it's very expensive to maintain it. There's a lot of time and sweat equity that goes into working.
And no safety net.
I know, right? So there's a lot that realtors do for their clients. It's not an easy process at all. It's not short. It takes time, and time is money. I mean, it's just like if you're working for a banking institution and you have a position as an accountant or a financial analyst. They're paying you $60,000 a year or $75,000 a year. If you feel as though you are worth more than that, then you may go and seek an opportunity somewhere else. And if you do, you're not going to allow them to pay you $35,000 or $40,000. I have this experience. I have this credential. I know my worth.
Right.
It goes the same way with realtors,
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody's going to go to work for free.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's true. And I feel like it doesn't take a customer very long to understand that.
Yeah.
Right? Like they realize that you have a certain kind of value that demands a price with, regardless of the breakdown.
Yeah.
Because it's not like somebody's paying for it out of pocket every single time, fully to make it happen. I think that people too frequently do not uncover the full benefit of their sales professional, because you're right. Like, you are a counselor, a confidant, you are in some capacities a little bit of an advisor,
Yes,
like from
and
from a
most.
financial and like life coach perspective.
Yes,
So
yes.
there's a lot that goes into it, and it's nice when you have someone who gives each and every customer the time of day, because it's too easy for people to do like a little bit of a filtering process with their preconceived notions or first impressions. And they're like, oh, well, this person said they're a doctor, right?
Right.
So I'm going to give them, the most amount of attention. So-and-so, they're not in the same pricing bracket or whatever.
Right.
So, less enthused to help them.
Right.
That stuff follows you, and people can see right through it any day of the week, because it warms my heart when I talk to somebody, and if they're already working with a realtor, and before I can even attest to the realtor's strength, like before I even have the chance for the words to come out of my mouth, they're already talking about how wonderful the person
Oh
is.
yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Oh yes. Oh
Like
yes.
that is
Yep.
incredible. And then, when somebody refers you as a past client to a new client, there are a few things from a business perspective, there are a few things more powerful than that, right?
Oh,
That's a big deal. So I like some of the things that you've talked about,
Yeah.
and I think it's really, really fun. So do you need to go? Do you need to head out?
Yeah.
Want me to wrap it up? Okay.
I was looking, yeah, because it's 4.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this has been a ton of fun,
It
and I sincerely
has.
hope that this is not the last time we do it, because we've done a few different iterations of episodes like these where we talk about a few different things. But I mean, you and I, like, we jumped nearly straight into the nuance of your side and the nuance of my
Yes.
side.
Yes.
And it was a little bit more oriented to what a customer may want to hear.
Right.
It wasn't about how awesome you are. It wasn't about what I can do that other people, and just not that kind of annoying stuff that,
Yeah.
I don't know, just not that exciting. So I think it was cool just to kind of uncover what we see, what's limiting. Hopefully somebody listening to this will say, oh, well, they brought up one or two things that I really haven't thought about before.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And I'm really hoping, I'm sincerely hoping that it is beneficial for people in our like industries as much as it is
Yes.
as customers, as well as just more so oriented. The conversation was to a consumer or a customer.
Yeah.
But man, I think you're awesome. Like you need,
thank
you need
you.
to come.
You are too.
Yeah, you need to do something like this yourself, and you're welcome here anytime, and I
Well,
absolutely,
thank you.
I had a blast, and I
I enjoyed
appreciate
it.
your energy.
I
And keep doing what
appreciate
you're
you.
doing, because I think people respond really well to you. So right before we close out, though, do us a solid and let us know how people can get in contact with you.
Okay. You can contact me at 601-880-3803. My email address is dbland@arc, A-R-C, realty, REALTY, co.com.
Awesome. I love it. If there's anything that Deidre can help you with, she's the one to do it. She's
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Team Mom for the win.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
it,
right.
Thomas.
See you guys later.
Yep. Have a wonderful one. Bye.